Buenos días, muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos a quienes ya se conectan en este foro virtual sobre tecnología e innovación, cómo construir puentes con Israel. Quiero también agradecer el espacio a nuestros empresarios, donantes y fiduciarios, que sin ellos pues nada de esto sería posible. Gracias por todo el apoyo que nos dan a la institución. Un poco sobre la agenda que vamos a tener esta mañana. Las palabras de bienvenida estarán a cargo de Ricardo Mancía, director de Fundesa. Luego vamos a tener un conversatorio moderado por Salvador Pais, director de Fundesa, con el embajador saliente de Israel ante la ONU, el señor Danny Danon. Esta conversación va a ser en inglés. Como podrán ver, tanto sus micrófonos como también sus cámaras se mantendrán apagadas a lo largo del evento, pero cuando lleguemos a la sección de preguntas y comentarios, pueden hacer sus preguntas en la sección de preguntas y comentarios en su controlador, y desde ahí pues podrán directamente, Salvador Pais estará leyendo las preguntas y haciéndolas directamente, y luego pues pasaremos al cierre. Gracias nuevamente a las empresas que ayudan a que Fundesa pueda realizar este tipo de foros ahora en esta modalidad virtual. Dejo en el uso de la palabra entonces a Ricardo Mancía, director de Fundesa. Adelante, Ricardo.
Muy buenos días, señor Dani Danon, embajador saliente de Israel ante la Organización de Naciones Unidas, señor Salvador Páez, director de Fundesa, señoras y señores fiduciarios y empresarios donantes de Fundesa, estimados representantes de las diferentes cámaras y asociaciones empresariales, señoras y señores representantes de instituciones de gobierno y de las diferentes municipalidades que nos acompañan, estimados amigos de los diferentes centros de investigación, institutos de capacitación y organizaciones de la sociedad civil, estimados representantes de cooperativas, distinguidos líderes religiosos, apreciables representantes de organismos internacionales y de cooperación de los diferentes países amigos que están presentes en este foro virtual, estimados amigos de comunicación, amigas y amigos todos. Sean todos bienvenidos a este foro sobre tecnología e innovación, cómo construir puentes con Israel. La primera semana de agosto tuvimos un evento con diferentes autoridades de gobierno en esta plataforma para hablar sobre las oportunidades y desafíos de la estrategia digital para Guatemala. Desde esa fecha para acá, en Fundesa hemos estado trabajando junto con el gobierno de Guatemala en generar un documento que permita un plan nacional de gobierno digital para nuestro país. Un esfuerzo conjunto que va a permitir que todos los ministerios cuenten con una hoja de ruta para la digitalización y que durante los próximos 3 años se reduzcan las barreras a la tecnología y la innovación dentro de los servicios públicos. Respecto a la inversión extranjera directa en Guatemala, para el 2019, vemos que cerramos con 998.2 millones de dólares, lo cual representa un 1.2% del PIB. Del total de inversión extranjera directa, el 1.46% proviene de Israel, especialmente en los sectores de energía y construcción. La balanza comercial con Israel es deficitaria, en un 7.51 millones de dólares. Nuestras exportaciones representaron 16 millones de dólares, mientras las importaciones fueron de 23.5 millones de dólares. Guatemala le exporta a Israel mayoritariamente cardamomo, azúcar y frutas, mientras que de Israel importamos máquinas y aparatos mecánicos para usos electrotécnicos, insecticidas y aluminio. Hoy queremos escuchar al embajador saliente de Israel ante la ONU, el señor Dani Danon, quien comentará sobre cómo Guatemala puede aumentar la atracción de inversión desde Israel y enfocar nuestros esfuerzos en tecnología e innovación para construir un país más próspero. La agenda de tecnología e innovación en nuestro país requiere de un gran impulso a la educación, a las ciencias y sobre todo a la introducción de ecosistemas de innovación que permitan aumentar la inversión en investigación y desarrollo, y es algo que desde Fundesa hemos venido acompañando desde las ciudades intermedias para descentralizar la capacidad productiva de los procesos de desarrollo como seguimiento a la política nacional de competitividad. Esperamos que esta conversación sea de su agrado y que la retroalimentación que se pueda tener ayude a unificar los lazos de amistad entre Israel y Guatemala en beneficio de ambos países. Te dejo en el uso de la palabra, Salvador, y muchas gracias por esta moderación.
Muchas gracias. Gracias, Ricardo. Y a continuación, solo vamos a pasar un video antes de entrar en la conversación.
No UNESCO declaration, no empty speeches, no General Assembly resolution will ever drive us from Jerusalem. ולשופט גולדסטון אני בא ואומר, אנחנו לא מקבלים את הדוח הזה.
Why should Americans be concerned that Iran will take this to the next level?
Look what Iran did in the past.
that sponsor terrorism all over the world.
למלא באמונה את תפקידי כחבר הממשלה ולקיים את החלטות הכנסת.
It's got to be one of the toughest arenas to defend Israel in, and the man currently taking on that challenge, Israeli ambassador to the UN, Dani Danon.
Despite the rising voices of anti-Semitism, today the reality is different. Today we have the state of Israel. Use this opportunity to start direct negotiations. If President Abbas was serious about negotiating, he wouldn't be here in New York. He would be in Jerusalem. This is a deed to our land. In this aerial photo that we are revealing today for the first time, you can see the complete transformation of this village into a terror terminal. Jerusalem is our capital for 3,000 years, and no UN resolution can deny our connection to our eternal capital.
Wow, you just said a mouthful there. That was chilling, Ambassador.
We welcome the involvement not only of the US, but other international players, even some of the moderate Arab countries, but you need the Palestinians to be on board. And unfortunately, they prefer to go to France to come to the UN, but not to sit down and negotiate with us. תהילים. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן. אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. We will keep fighting until anti-Semitism is finally defeated. עם ישראל חי.
Good morning, Ambassador Danon. It's really a true privilege to have this opportunity this morning to speak about how to build stronger bridges between Guatemala and Israel and to discuss technology and innovation. Welcome.
Thank you. Buenos dias. Thank you very much, Salvador. I'm very happy to meet you again. I wish we could do it in person, but God will do it in a few months when I come to visit you or you'll come to visit me in Jerusalem.
I truly look forward to that, Ambassador. Before jumping into what I know will be a great conversation about technology and innovation and the bridges between Israel and Guatemala, please allow me just to introduce you. I know the video did a great job, but I wanted to comment and highlight some points about your bio for the folks that are tuning in this morning and watching this interview. It's obviously quite an extensive bio, so I will only highlight a couple of points. But Ambassador Danon was born in Israel in 1971, completed his IDF service with the rank of lieutenant, and served as an overall commander of the Marva Volunteer Program. Mr. Danon holds a BA in International Relations from FIU, magna cum laude, I must say, and an MA in Public Policy and Public Administration from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and also studied at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem Law School. He served amongst other things as chairman of the World Likud, member of the Jewish Agency Board of Governors, member of the Zionist Executive of the WZO, and chairman of the World Betar Executive. As chair of the World Likud organization from 2006 to 2015, he supported Israel's public diplomacy efforts in the international arena. From 2004 to 2009, he served as a board of directors of the Jewish Agency for Israel and is chair of the Likud faction in the World Zionist Organization. Ambassador Danon served as Deputy Minister of Defense from March 2013 until July 2014, and in May 2015, he was appointed Minister of Science, Technology, and Space, serving until his appointment in August 2015, when he was named Israel's ambassador to the United Nations up until this last month. Technology is moving at an incredible pace, Ambassador Danon. And we live in an amazing era where things like autonomous cars, personalized medicine, quantum computing, they're all becoming real as we speak. Artificial intelligence, cryptocurrencies, advanced automation, deep learning are all reshaping the world that we live in. While increased investments in science and innovation in developing countries offer promising opportunities for growth and prosperity, the pace and the scale of technological change presents challenges, particularly for countries like Guatemala, where we fear being left behind and creating this technological adoption gap, and as that gap broadens. As a former Minister of Science and Technology and Space, as well as Israel's outgoing ambassador to the UN, you have a really unique perspective on how technology and innovation is shaping our world. And in this sense, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation this morning. If I could pick your brain, I wanted to start with what is it that makes Israel one of the hottest innovation and technology hubs in the world, with over 6,000 active startups and an economy dominated by high tech and entrepreneurship? Israel certainly earned the nickname Startup Nation. Our goal in Fundesa is to scale up local ecosystems, especially in what we call intermediary cities. What would you suggest to countries like ours, to countries like Guatemala, to stimulate entrepreneurship, to disrupt current analog industries, and to become a rapidly evolving startup nation ourselves?
So thank you, Salvador, again. Thank you, Fundesa, for hosting me. I had a great 2 visits in Guatemala, and I'm looking forward to come back. I want to thank all the board members that I remember the beautiful lunch we had. I want to thank Pastor Luna Cash, who hosted me, my friend Isaac Fauci, the commissioner, and many, many friends we have in Guatemala. And I really look forward to host you back here in Israel. First, I want to answer your question by telling you, Salvador, we had no choice. We had no natural resources. Even though God promised us the land, in the deed, in the Bible, he didn't promise to give it with oil or with any other means to survive. So basically, we had no choice. We had to think creatively to see what we can do in the land in terms of the natural resources. And that's how we came out with ideas, whether it's drip irrigation, water desalination, wastewater treatment. And if in the 60s and 70s, I remember as a child, we always were told to save water and not to waste water because we had no water. Today, we are lucky that we are able to actually help other countries in the region, and we are selling water to Jordan, to the Palestinians, and we were able to manage the crisis of water. So I think when you have no choice, you have to think creatively. And I think in Guatemala, you have great potential. First, you have to understand, when I was at the UN for the last 5 years, people that I spoke with were sure that Israel is a huge country. It's a startup nation. How many people you have there? 50 million, 200 million? And I told my colleagues, no, we have 9 million people. That's it. A small country, you can drive from north to south in 5 hours. So it's small population, but a lot of innovation. In order to make it happen, my recommendation to my friends in the government of Guatemala and in the business sector, you have to start with the kids. You have to start with the high schoolers. Don't wait for them to get to the universities. It's too late. And I think the first thing you have to teach your children is how to fail. I know it sounds weird, and you think, well, what are you talking about? You know, we want to teach. I have 3 children myself, and we always educate them about success and getting the best results in their exams, in their schools. But I think we have to teach them to fail, and to teach them they should not have any fear of failing. So basically, if they want to start to study or to do something new, to encourage them to do it. And even if they fail, to say it's great. Let's learn from what we did now, and let's move on to the next idea. And when you mentioned, Salvador, the startups in Israel, but you didn't mention how many startups failed in Israel. This is part of the mentality. We are not afraid to fail, and failure is part of the victory, because at the end, you achieve your goal. So I think this is the lesson number one. Lesson number two is to cut bureaucracy. I know that President Giammattei is dealing with it now. COVID is not helping, but you have to cut red tape and to allow entrepreneurs to flourish. Otherwise, they will move to other places. And I will give you one example. When I was in government as Minister of Science and Technology, we found out that we have natural gas offshore. And there was a huge debate about what we should do with the profits, how much money should go to the public or to the private companies. And Prime Minister Netanyahu and myself, we pushed to take fast decisions to allow the private sector to step in and to get the gas out of the ground and use it. And we did it. And we were very lucky because other countries in the region are doing the same today. So if you have too much bureaucracy, the business sectors will not be there. They will move somewhere else, and you want to keep them involved. So you need a combination of the private and public sectors in order to succeed. And last thing I would add to that, I don't know how do you say it in Spanish. I speak some Spanish, I have to tell you in advance, but we have a word in Yiddish, it's called chutzpah. Chutzpah, it's when you have no shame. This is part of our culture. Sometimes it's not pleasant when people are too rude, but I think in Guatemala, from what I saw, you also have some directness and chutzpah. And basically, it allows people to tell what they think to their superiors. For example, in the military service. In Israel, we have a mandatory military service at the age of 18. I was a lieutenant in the IDF. My son will join the IDF in a few months. And maybe you will say, you know, when you send your child to the military, you actually postpone his development, his education, because kids go to college only after the military if they want to, and they go at the age of 22, 21. But we found out that it actually helped them, because in the military, they get the right discipline, but at the same time, they can express their opinion and come up with great ideas and new ideas. And many times, when you look at the people who are leading the startup sector in Israel, they started to deal with those issues when they were wearing uniforms. And we allowed them. And I remember myself as a young lieutenant, when I had disagreements with my superiors, I spoke up politely. You know, I was able to get into the room and say, maybe we should do something else. And people listened to me. And that's what we do today also. So we allow the young generation to speak up in the military. And then when they finish the military, they can go out and explore those ideas. So I think this is, in a nutshell, the startup ecosystem is to cut bureaucracy, to learn how to fail, and to actually use the military service as an advantage and not disadvantage.
I love it. I love it. I mean, and certainly I think there's things like chutzpah that we need to develop culturally here in Guatemala. Unfortunately, I think that we're a little too kind sometimes, a little too concerned with, you know, what the other person might think. And we don't necessarily voice our opinions, and we don't necessarily promote people speaking up. So I thank you for some of those thoughts and recommendations. And I love this comment about also failure being a part of victory, and really celebrating that failure. It's not easy to be an entrepreneur. It's not easy to take these risks, and certainly taking the stigma away out of failure I think would go a long way towards stimulating further entrepreneurship in our country. How does Israel do it, though, in terms of attracting foreign investment into Israel? And you said so yourself, a country that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of natural resources, but certainly has been able to develop this startup nation ecosystem. How did it happen, especially early on, before you developed this reputation as startup nation? How did you convince people to come and invest in Israel?
So it wasn't easy at the beginning, and I can tell you a story from the UN. I started a program of bringing UN ambassadors to visit Israel, and at the beginning it was very difficult. After I brought the 2 first missions, it became much easier. The same with foreign investors. At the beginning, they were very skeptical. So we started with R&D centers, and we told them that the government actually gave them great incentives to open R&D centers in Israel. And at the beginning it was limited, but today we have great companies that are doing it in Israel. They're opening centers from all around the world, and that's something I would recommend to Guatemala. First, to give them the feeling that the judicial system is functioning and they can feel secure about their investments. And second is to give them investments to put not only the factories, because factories you have in Guatemala, and today I think you will have more factories because there is a need coming from the US, and we see what's happening between the US and China. So I think you will get more factories, but you have to make sure you also have R&D, and you have the research and the labs and the manpower, and if you give all those tax breaks, you will be able to attract many investors.
Thank you. Those are certainly very powerful initiatives, very powerful ideas, and hopefully some of our members of government are paying attention as well and tuning into this conversation and taking these comments on board. So thank you for that, Ambassador Danon. Let me shift gears a little bit towards our historic relationship. Guatemala and Israel have a deep and historic relationship. Guatemala was among the first countries to recognize Israel, and recently was the second country to move its embassy back to Jerusalem. It was originally in Jerusalem, but has now moved it back to Jerusalem. There's a new Guatemalan-Israeli Chamber of Commerce that is currently being formed as we speak. And Guatemala also hosts a yearly innovation summit co-chaired by Israeli entrepreneur Yossi Bardi, as you know. However, FDI, foreign direct investment from Israel to Guatemala, still represents only 1.46% of total investment. What could we be doing differently? What can we do better to attract more foreign direct investment from Israel and to build stronger and better bridges between our 2 countries?
So I think what we are doing now, it's a great start. And I think maybe we can suggest to do something similar, that we will host you, Salvador, in front of Israeli business and person and investors and show them the potential in Guatemala. And I agree with you. There's a lot of excitement. I felt it in Guatemala when people recognize me, when they speak about Israel at churches. And I think it's the only country in the world beside Israel that you celebrate our independence. And also when you come to Israel, you will see the excitement. I remember when I had the chance to escort President Yamate before his inauguration, he came to Jerusalem, and there was a lot of excitement around that visit. So I think we have the excitement, and now we need to get it more into practical actions. And I think by bringing Israeli business people to Guatemala to show them the potential, we can actually get them more involved. And also I would add to that also US investors. I think the US also, they appreciate the move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And as you mentioned, unfortunately, it's still the only country that followed the US. I can tell you without mentioning names that I'm involved, and God's will, in the near future, we will see more countries, including some of your some countries in your region that will follow Guatemala and move their embassies. But I know that the US also, they are willing to invest more and to do more because they appreciate the move of the embassy. So it's not only important for us, it's also important for the US. So I think we have to think about two ways. First is bilateral agreements between US, Israel, and Guatemala, where we bring maybe the knowledge and the know-how, you bring the manpower, the energy, the markets in the region, and the US can help with funding. I think it can be very interesting for all of us. And I have to tell you something personal. I personally feel committed to support the economy of Guatemala, because even in the Bible, it says that once you help the people of Israel, you have become blessed. And I think it's up to us to make it happen and to show to the world that those who stand with Israel, they get a blessing. So we have to help God to make this prophecy become a reality. So I think you will find many people in the US and in Israel who have the desire. We need to guide them in the right direction.
Thank you, Ambassador Denon. And we certainly feel that personal commitment. You're traveling to Guatemala the couple of times that at least I've seen you here is a true testament to that commitment. And we certainly feel your friendship and the genuine sentiment that you're expressing. It's not just something that you're saying. I think that I can personally attest to that commitment that you have towards our country. And I really love this idea of the trilateral agreements, bringing in the US also into the mix. Seems like a very interesting and powerful idea. I want to ask a question from the audience. Mariana Cordon is asking us, what are the best forums, channels, etc., that we can identify and get in contact with investors from Israel that would be interested in these kinds of projects in Guatemala, either job creation or job intensive projects or technology and modernization projects or enterprises?
So as you mentioned now, you have the Chamber of Commerce and we have our embassy that they are dealing with those issues and are excited about those issues. And I also know that you have private companies that are starting to do more. For example, Watergen, which is a company that produces water out of thin air, which is something which is amazing that we developed in Israel. They already gave a donation to one of the hospitals in Guatemala. And in the future, hopefully they will be able to open a factory or maybe an R&D center in Guatemala. So I think you need to come up with the ideas, approach our embassy, and I think also the personal relationship that we have with the administration. We have great relationships, and I know that we are getting ready to sign more agreements with Guatemala.
Fantastic, fantastic news. Thank you, Ambassador. Talking about that, the relationship you mentioned with the Guatemalan government and some of those agreements with the Guatemalan government, I wonder if you can share with us some more color, if you will, on a recent announcement by President Giammattei, where he basically commented that Israel would be entering phase 3 of its vaccine trials for COVID-19, and that Guatemala would be prioritized in its distribution. What can you tell us about that process to develop the vaccine and about Israeli innovation in this very critically important initiative?
So we are all praying for the vaccine to come as soon as possible. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the movement, they call themselves the BDS movement, they call to boycott Israel. And my dream that Israel will develop the vaccine, and those who call to boycott Israel will have to make the decision whether they are using the vaccine or not. And it will be an interesting thing to see what will be the decision. So we do have 2 labs in Israel that are working very hard on the vaccination. We hope that in the next few weeks they will be able to move forward to the next stage. And definitely, once we have the vaccination, Guatemala, for us, is a strong ally, and we will do our best to support Guatemala. As an Israeli, I would be very proud if it will come first from Israel, but as a human being, even if the vaccination will come from other country, it will be a blessing for us. So we work very hard on that, and I hope that we'll be able to come with good news that we have a vaccination made in Israel.
I think the entire world is praying for that vaccine, and I really hope that, I wish Israel success in that initiative, in that endeavor, for the benefit of all mankind. So thank you also, Israel, for that innovation, for that investment in science and technology, which is enabling the development of this vaccine. And certainly we hope as Guatemala to be one of your partners and customers, I guess, as that vaccine rolls out. Let me shift gears a little bit to talk a little bit about the UN. And certainly you've had that very important role, critically important role of representing Israel in a forum like the UN. And let me tell you a little bit also, I guess, about a story about how in 2012, I had the opportunity and the honor of being invited to speak at the UN at the request of then Ambassador Prosor of Israel. I was asked to give some words on behalf of our country, on behalf of Guatemala, but also some words as a member of the private sector. Do you know the topic that was being discussed that day was entrepreneurship? And it was the first time that entrepreneurship, as I was informed at that forum at the UN, it was the first time that it was being discussed as a part of the General Assembly as a means to stimulate development. How do you view the role and performance of the UN in supporting development in countries like Guatemala? And how do you view the UN's potential role in furthering things like entrepreneurship as part of that development agenda?
So I think the UN can do a lot, but unfortunately, when you look at the actions of the UN, they are not focused and they are too political. And unfortunately, instead of promoting cooperation on sustainable development issues, the SDGs, all those things are put aside, and you see that it's becoming very political. For example, when I put forward a resolution on technology, some of the Arab countries tried to block it. At the end, we got the vote and we passed the resolution, but the discussion became political. And that's unfortunate because the resolution was not political, and it was actually supporting the needs of many of those countries who opposed the resolution. I'm optimistic. Look, today we have a third peace agreement with Arab countries on the way. We signed a peace treaty with Egypt, Jordan, and now we are signing with the UAE. And many Israelis are excited about flying to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And I think the bilateral track will be faster than the multilateral track, meaning that in the UN, unfortunately, they will continue to focus on political issues and attacks and accusations and the blame game. And I think on the bilateral stage, we can do much more, and that's what we are doing with many of the Muslim countries, Arab countries in the Gulf, and I'm very optimistic about that.
Yes, and congratulations for that agreement with the UAE. It's really a transformational, I think, agreement for the region and a real testament for the changes that are happening and that are being led by Israel. So congratulations for that, Ambassador. I think that that's a very powerful message, and I think also a testament of what can be accomplished on that bilateral front, as you're suggesting.
Absolutely. I visited Dubai a few years ago, and back then, we had no diplomatic relations, and I had to come, incognito, and it was different. And today we're actually starting to get requests for business opportunities from the UAE, and I think the great potential for all of us. And maybe we can do also things with Guatemala, with the investor from the Gulf and our technology. So I think it opens a lot of doors.
Sure, sure. So staying on the global front and some of these global changes, one of the things that we see as coming out of this COVID pandemic is the new buzzword about the resilience of supply chains, and how companies are really rethinking some of the concentration of their historical supply chains and their over-dependence on certain countries like China. And they are disrupting that supply chain and rethinking it in a way that creates resilience and allows for products to not necessarily run into the risks of what we've seen over the last couple of weeks and months in terms of shortages, particularly in medical protection equipment and whatnot. Guatemala, on the other hand, is, I would say, geostrategically located in a position where we can take advantage of some of those shifts. I wonder what your thoughts are on this process, this supply chain disruption process, and if you think that Israel might be a partner in developing Guatemala as a supply chain and logistics hub.
So I think there's a great opportunity. As you mentioned today, with the US, there's a lot of tension regarding China. Secretary Pompeo just left Jerusalem a few hours ago. He came to visit us before visiting other countries in the region. And the issue of China is always on the table. And I think when you look at the US today, they have the policy of nearshoring. They want to get things from their neighborhood. And I think it's a great opportunity for countries like Guatemala. And you have to work fast because you have other countries that are in the area that will compete with you. And I think Israel can be there first as a bridge to the US. You know, we have a lot of friends, and I say it whenever I speak with officials. I say about the relationship we have with Guatemala and about our desire to make it an example for the entire world, for the support of Israel and the US. And also we can help in terms of bringing the know-how, in terms of building or using technology. And things today are moving faster, and it's really easy to get things done. And I think it will be a great opportunity, as I mentioned before, when you have an agreement between the US, Guatemala, and Israel, it can go directly to this issue of the supply chain and to get things done in Guatemala in order to support the area.
Sure, and maybe taking you up on your offer to have a conversation like this one, but with members of the Israeli private sector, to have that opportunity to tell that story, to share with them the potential of Guatemala as that geostrategically located country that can be the doorway into the USMCA, what was previously known as NAFTA, where that southern border. So I think we do have a compelling story to tell, and hopefully we'll have that opportunity to share it with friends in Israel, friends in the United States, and others that might help invest into that dream to develop Guatemala into a logistics hub of sorts. Let me turn to some of the questions from our audience. I see the questions here are pouring in. Let me ask a question by Dr. Rios, is asking, what is the experience of the government of Israel in implementing electronic government and electronic signature? And you know, you spoke about cutting red tape already, but if I may add there, has it played a role digitalizing government of Israel? Has that been a part of cutting that red tape?
Absolutely. So today, you know, everyone can do everything from the iPhone in Israel, you know, especially now with the COVID-19, you know, the government had to adapt also to that. So we can do almost everything without physically attending any government office. And I think that's the way we should do, not because of COVID, because that's the way life that we have to get used to them today. So yes, we did it. It wasn't easy with the older population. I think that's something you have to bear in mind when you apply the same thing in Guatemala, meaning that you have certain people at certain age that you cannot tell them not to come to the post office to collect something. Even they don't have to do it. You can send them, by email or by text or WhatsApp, but for the elderly, it's impossible. So it has to be done gradually. But with the newcomers, with the next generation, it's a given. And I think in the future, we would ask ourselves why we went to the banks, why we went to the government offices, we waited in line, even to the health clinics. I think in the future, that's something we develop in Israel, with the technology that will minimize the visits that you go to see your doctor or to get treated. Most treatments and most labs checks will be done from your house. So basically, you will do the test in your house, you will ship it somewhere, and after a few hours, you will get it on your phone, the results. So you don't have to go and spend time. So to your question, indeed, we are doing it, and I think we can do much more on that.
Yeah, that would be a dream in a country like Guatemala, where we currently, I think, have still so much red tape, so much paper pushing and paper processes. Also, to your point about judicial certainty and judicial processes, that's another area that I think would be benefited by digitalization and making these processes much more efficient, much more expeditious. So thank you. I think that those are certainly things that we aspire to, and hopefully we'll have a chance to implement some of those ideas. And again, hopefully there's folks from government. We had a panel just a couple of weeks ago where we discussed precisely these topics about how to implement technology into government. Let me shift gears. Mario Rodriguez is asking about women in Israel and about their role in education, technology, and business. And I can certainly say, having met with some of those Israeli women entrepreneurs, that they certainly have that chutzpah that you spoke about before. What can you tell us about women entrepreneurs in Israel in particular?
So in Israel, gender equality is very important, and you see women in every field, in every position, and we are very proud of it. And I think we need to do that, because if you want to be creative and to give proper solutions, you need to have gender equality and to be open-minded. So we welcome it, and I think it's a blessing. And I personally, as the Minister of Science and Technology, I gave special grants to labs, institutions that actually promoted women to the higher positions, because still when you look at the numbers, you don't see them in the senior positions of the universities and the academia, and I think we should encourage it by giving incentives to those institutions that actually allow women to move up the ladder.
Thank you, and I think that that's an important message for our country as well. That gender equality is certainly something that we need to do a better job with, and I think that it's a concept that we need to really embrace much more. Certainly, I think we're moving in that direction, but not at the pace that I think we need to be moving forward. So thank you for that, Ambassador. What I wonder, as we close down our very interesting conversation, but what message might you leave particularly for our youth? What messages would you send our country to become those transformational leaders? Jorge Barrientos is asking this question, in this new reality, and to participate in innovation of new technology and sustainable development for our country. So I wonder what message you might leave our country as a whole, but particularly our future young leaders.
So my main message to conclude, Salvador, is to be optimistic. When you look at the story of Israel, we have so many challenges, so many enemies. We suffered from so many wars, and despite that, we built a beautiful country, a strong economy. So you need to have the can-do mentality, can-do approach, and to be optimistic about the future. I think if you teach your children that they can make a change and should not be afraid from the process and from the struggle, they will be able to bring that change. So, and we do that in Israel, because when you open the news in Israel, you hear so much bad things. And I always try to convince my colleagues in the media, give 5 minutes a day to speak about the good things that are happening in Israel. So the kids, when they watch television, they will hear about terrorism, they will hear about crisis, but also they will see the great potential, the great importance of science and technology. And I think that is my message to you, is to be optimistic about it and focus the message of optimism to the young generation. I don't want to insult anyone here today, but after the age of 21, we are not young anymore. And today, if you want to make a change, you have to look at the 15, 16, the teenagers. They will be the one who will transform Guatemala and will transform Israel.
Thank you, Ambassador. That's a great message with which to conclude our panel this morning and our conversation. That message of optimism, and also thank you for that friendship between our nations and that friendship and your own personal commitment as well towards Guatemala. It's been a fascinating conversation. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and I will take you up on that offer. Hopefully we can do this again with some Israeli entrepreneurs and do a similar forum to continue building bridges between our two countries.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fundesa, for hosting me. And as you say in Spanish, hasta luego.
Hasta luego, embajador.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Muchas gracias, Salvador Pais, por moderar este foro. Gracias a todos por acompañarnos esta mañana. Recordarles que estamos haciendo estas reuniones justamente mañana. Vamos a tener a las 6 de la tarde al subdirector del INGUAT. Así es que los invitamos desde ya que se conecten. Pueden encontrar más información en nuestras redes sociales. Muchísimas gracias nuevamente a todos nuestros donantes también, porque gracias a ellos es que podemos hacer este tipo de eventos. Y hasta la próxima. Que tengan muy feliz día.